Hello, everybody. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Georgiana.
And this is Wholehearted Loving, where we teach you simple tools for self-love and compassion to grow the muscles you need to be with big feelings, triggers, and overwhelming sensations in your body.
Whether you have active challenges in your life or relationships, or whether you're just here to learn to be kinder to yourself, we pull out all the little things that make life feel better, the things that give you a sense of hope and direction.
So if you're too hard on yourself or on others,
if you want to feel real, deep connection in your life and relationships,
even if you want to reprogram your inner critic while you're sleeping,
this is a great place to be.
So welcome, and we hope this episode brings you just the tidbit you needed today.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about normalizing the freeze response and bringing yourself back after you've had a freeze experience. You can find self-reflection prompts for this episode and every episode on our Instagram at Wholehearted Loving, and you can learn more about us and how to practice with us live on our website at wholeheartedloving.com. Before we get started, we'll do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and this podcast.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm sitting in a totally different setup than usual. And so my body is adjusting. So I think because I know that, I'm going to give myself a little grace to be moving around a little bit more today to find the sweet spot moment to moment.
Good.
Body connection practice. Let's go with, I had one in mind, and I'm going to see if that one still feels like the right one or if something else feels better. Yeah, I think I'll go with this. Let's play the drums. Let's play the drums, but on our body. So using your hands to find a rhythm of drumming anywhere on your body. It could be the same spots over and over again, or you can mix it up. You might know right away what feels good, or you might need to try a few things out.
Ooh, I'm drumming the tops of the back of my hands and it feels like I'm in trouble.
I don't like that either.
No.
I'm drumming on my knee and my other thigh. And it's okay. But I think I like one on my upper chest and one on my thigh. I can tell, I can sense my breathing totally shifting. And the rhythm that feels good for me is alternating. And what I notice is instead of drumming by taking my hand or my fist completely off my body after I make contact, if I leave the heels of my hands on my body, that feels better.
I'm so glad you said that because I was all heels. It didn't occur to me to take my whole hand off and put it up. Now I'm trying that.
And now that, neat. Okay, now that I had a hand on my upper chest for a while to sort of help things settle a bit, now I've gone to my sort of just above my knee and under my knee. And I noticed if I go at the same slow speed as I was going earlier, that just feels annoying and yucky. But if I speed it up a little bit, and now I'm even going on the side of my knee, left and right, that feels sort of nice. And now I'm just going with my 8 fingers on my upper chest, alternating faster than how I initially started. And I'm curious what happens when I slow down, so I'm trying that out. Oh, neat. When I slow down, my breathing slows. I feel like I'm sinking into the chair now.
Mm.
Huh. I have no idea.
Yeah. That's an interesting combination of soothing and discovery.
Mhm. What do you notice now? I'm like, oh, she's patting her hips or something.
Yeah. I got a thigh pat going on.
Oh,
Such.
your hip pat. I was doing both on my left and my right hip fast and at the same time. Then I went down to my lower on the thighs. And then now there's a little bit more playful,
Ah.
sort of going everywhere at this interesting new rhythm where I feel like I'm playfully playing a set of drums right now.
Yeah, you got a whole drum kit.
Yeah. But I don't think this would have felt good at the beginning. This
Mm.
probably swirled me a bit.
Yes.
So that's neat.
That's a pretty important commentary on slow entries into anything instead of just diving into the deep end and hoping you can swim.
Mhm. And not assuming that I don't want something fast and more playful.
Mhm.
It's just that maybe my system needed something before that.
It becomes that. Yeah, totally.
Neat.
Thanks, Gigi.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, freeze response.
My good.
The context here, what a great opportunity to practice all these tools when you're on what, the 30th floor of a building? Is
I'm
that
on the
right?
floor, yes.
And
I
there's
love
an earthquake.
the 30th floor. I love generally being on the 30th floor. I'm not someone who feels like that doesn't cause me anxiety. I know some of my friends think like that's nuts and they would feel very uneasy
Mhm.
knowing that they're on a 30th floor, but I love the view. I love how it feels. I love that on the 30th floor when I look outside, I feel like I'm in my own little world a little bit. So
Yeah.
generally, it's a very soothing experience for me.
Less so during an earthquake,
Less so during an earthquake, as I recently discovered. Yes.
even less so during two earthquakes.
Yes. Or like two big moments where I felt like something is not right.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
this is the experience that you had a couple of weeks ago. And this is what sparked this episode topic. Do you want to walk us through what happened?
Yeah. So, first of all, I want to say, and I think it's really neat to be this intentional about how I talk about something that was hard. I want to say I lived through it. I'm fine. Everybody that I know and love and care about is fine. People around me in the neighborhood are fine. We're all okay. It didn't cause, I don't think, really any damage or significant damage to anyone, but I know that a lot of people had quite the fright, quite the scare.
Yeah.
And just as I'm saying that, I know it's like a deep breath wants to come. Right? It feels good to acknowledge, good in my body to acknowledge we lived through that, I lived through that, and I'm okay. And it feels okay to be talking about what happened.
Yeah.
So, this is that practice of being intentional when we talk about things that we've gone through that are hard, of what helps me in the beginning as I'm just starting to talk about it. Does it help me in my system to remind myself I'm okay? Right? Does it help the person I'm talking to feel a little bit more regulated, a little bit more present to remind them that I'm also okay? Like I'm about to tell you something that was sort of startling and scary. But before I go into that, I want to remind you and me and our systems that everything is okay now.
Yeah. Um, Before you get started or continue,
Mhm.
part of what you've just described is because of all of the content and story and experience that we all associate with just the word earthquake, right?
Yeah.
You got to prepare yourself and the other person because we immediately have a huge picture in our mind of what earthquake means and what
Mhm.
kind of preparation earthquake means. And for us, we live on the west coast of Canada. And I don't know what it's like for people elsewhere in the world, but we're programmed from a very young age. We have earthquake drills in school. We're hiding under desks. We're being trained how to deal with all this stuff. We've got earthquake kits and earthquake insurance for houses. And we've sort of been told there's gonna be a big one. Like we're all just waiting for the big one, you know? So like all of that is present while we're experiencing, even having heard, like I didn't feel the earthquake where I was, but I saw on Facebook earthquake, and then people start messaging earthquake, and all of that stuff comes up even though I wasn't there for it, you know?
Yes, and I was going to touch on this later, but since you're talking about it now, I wanted to acknowledge the significance of even when you've made it through something. And as I tell the story of what happened, what you're going to notice is I was really surprised by how activated my system was by this seemingly small earthquake that didn't really cause any damage. And I think part of that, it was important to acknowledge that in my system, in my body, like I'm 46 years old, like you said, ever since we've been in kindergarten, right? At 5 years old, we've been taught prepare for the big one. The big one is going to come at some point in our lifetime. The big one is coming. And that's not something I actively think about on a day-to-day basis. But what I think I noticed through the process was, wow, like my body has been holding something all these years, knowing that it might come one day. But I'm not aware of that day to day. So that was just really interesting to notice what happened in my body and how this earthquake impacted me after the actual earthquake was over. And I'll share more about that as we talk things through. But it was important, I think, for me to let my body know, no wonder you felt so activated. Not only was it scary in the moment, but this has been something we've been bracing for our whole lives, right? And so that's really scary to have it happen in a moment, or you're in a moment where you're not sure if that is what's happening. And you're trying to figure that out while you're trying to keep yourself safe. It's a lot of things to try to track at the same time.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even then, I'm like, okay, my body needs to move. We've been talking about this for a bit. I need a reset. And this is something that when we work with people, we're actively trying to support them to build in this habit of slowing down and resetting and sensing what's happening in the body as they talk about hard things. Because it can get really easy to just talk about what happened and not recognize at all what's happening in our bodies and what our bodies are needing in order to be a little bit more here, feel a little bit more supported, so that the story of it, the words that come out of my mouth and my body have an opportunity to like dance together and integrate into a more cohesive story of like what happened and where am I today with it, right? We often, when people are talking and wanting to tell the story of what happened, which makes sense, you want to be seen in it, you want to be validated in it, people talk so fast. And then when they finally slow down, or we invite them to slow down, or we remind them to slow down, they're like, holy crap, I didn't realize what was going on with my body. I think I need a moment. I think I need some help to support my body right now to be with the reality of what I'm talking about. Right. So I'm going to build that
Yeah.
into talking about this today.
Mhm.
So if you're not watching us, what I'm doing here, I'm taking some time to sink into my chair again. I'm taking some time to like wiggle things out. And I think in the past, I would have like actively had to be like, okay, maybe I should feel my butt on the seat, or maybe I should move my body. What I'm noticing now is there's been enough practicing of that on board that I'm just aware, like my body's just doing its own thing. I've been practicing letting my body do its own thing. So as I sort of slow down my talking and I stop talking, my body has different movements it wants to do in order to sort of feel a little bit more here again, a little bit more settled. Right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So I was actually on a client call, which makes this even interesting. I was on a client call when, and it was like, it was a call where we felt we were feeling so connected to each other. Right. And all of a sudden, I'm like, something in me is telling me something weird is happening. And then I think the next thought that registered is, I think I just said the word earthquake. I said the person's name. I said earthquake, like Molly, earthquake, Sally, earthquake. And I just sort of sat there. And that was like, so it wasn't a complete like freeze and shutdown, but I was surprised there was like an element of like, part of my brain is like, what are you doing just sitting here, staring at your screen, saying earthquake? Like, why are you not getting up and doing something? Like, my mind tracked that. And then came that activation of, oh, I think I need to move. I need to change something here. So I think I said to the person, I gotta go. Right. And they were totally understanding. But then I sort of stopped again. And I was like, oh, no, no, it's fine. It's over now. Because that initial movement was finished. And then it started happening again. I felt it again. And then again, I noticed a little freezy, a little like, ooh. And then like, should I hang up? And like these things of like, should I hang up? Do I say goodbye? Like, how do I say goodbye to someone when an earthquake is happening and I'm on a client call and you want to be professional and not rude and leave someone hanging and someone's talking to you about some really important personal things. And like, I don't want to just run off. Like all these thoughts are going through my mind at the same time. And I'm sort of like overloaded with thoughts for a moment. And like, I have a bit of this freezy, like, I don't know which thought to follow.
Yeah.
And so then I think I finally said, I gotta go. I gotta go. And then I was like, what do I do? Do I click the red button that says leave call? Or do I just close my laptop? Or do I just run away? Like it was weird in that there was enough to let me know this is some type of emergency that I need to take seriously. And also, the weird thing about, I guess, an earthquake and the one that we experienced was that, like, it wasn't like the house was falling down right away. It was like this something felt off. But if I sort of look around, things sort of look okay. So it was this confusing, like, am I meant to go into like some protective thing or are we fine? So just trying to track what's happening and make sense of it put me in this state where it was more freezy than I expected.
Right.
Right? When you've been conditioned your whole life, and if I were to sit and talk to you, oh, anytime you feel something that could be an earthquake, we're drilled. Go under the table, cover your head and neck, right? Go into a doorway, get away from glass. But I was just staring at my screen. being like, what should I do?
Yeah.
And so the reason I really wanted to talk about this is that some of us have been in situations that are scary and horrifying. And in the moment, we froze. Or maybe we didn't even realize what was happening is that we froze. And in hindsight, or after in the aftermath of that experience, we might be really hard on ourselves. Why didn't I act differently? Why didn't I react differently? Why didn't I set a boundary? Why didn't I run away? Why didn't I protect myself in these ways we think we should? Right. And so this wasn't a hard event that involved another human. I was by myself, but it still does highlight for me what happens in a moment where your system is startled and confused and scared all at the same time. And it's like in that moment, the things you intellectually know that you have access to when you're regulated, you don't quite have access in the same way.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to me, like sometimes when you read on social media and someone talks about a difficult event or a news is reported, and people will sort of victim blame and victim shame of like, why didn't you do this? And why didn't they do that? And if it was really that bad, wouldn't they have done X, Y, Z? And I don't think you fully understand what could possibly be happening for someone in those kinds of moments until you've experienced that exact concoction of things happening at the same time that put your system into a freeze.
Yeah.
Right. Um, so I just want to acknowledge the compassion that I have for anyone who's gone through something hard and like froze, whether it was like I froze for a long time or I
Mhm.
froze for a moment.
Yeah.
That let's learn to be more compassionate to ourselves, that it's our system trying to figure it out and trying to protect us in the best way that it can at the time.
Yeah. And it is so normal, you know? So we've had this training, right? And you can apply this in so many areas of your life, wherever you might find yourself saying, I should have known better, or I know what to do, but
Mhm.
um, everyone I spoke to for a week after those earthquakes, my first question, so did you feel the earthquake? Yes. Oh my God. And did you go under a desk or in a doorway? And every single person said no, you know?
Mm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I remember like we got on our little friend group chat and one of our friends said like, I forgot everything. I forgot everything we've been taught,
Yeah.
right? And like when I read that message, I actually felt better. I was like, "Oh, it wasn't just me that like forgot everything."
No.
Right? Or forgot everything at least for a little bit while I'm trying to orient to what the heck is happening here.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. What we know is just out the window and what we feel supersedes it.
Yeah. So eventually, and I'm also playing with old conditioning for me to minimize hard and bad things.
Mm.
Right? I had to minimize a lot of hard and bad things growing up to sort of survive and not feel completely overwhelmed, and so I'm also playing with that. I'm also playing with old conditioning of if I'm not literally dying, I'm fine. Right? So I was like, okay, what do I do now? Do I go under the table? Right? And so I was like, let's just go under the table. So I went under the table and I got down, and scrunched down like we're taught in kindergarten. And I put my head down onto my knees and I use my hands and my arms to protect my neck and my head like we're taught to do. And then I'm like, now what? Right. And so I just went to the only things that I remembered from all this practice with these things that we talk about every podcast and in every group that we facilitate. Can I feel my legs on the ground? Can I feel my hands on my head? Right. I'm like, okay, I can feel those things. And that helped me settle a bit. Then I started looking around. I saw one table leg, and then I saw the other. And then I saw like the bookshelf. right? So I'm practicing all these ways of orienting that I've been practicing every day when there is no earthquake. And in that moment of hiding under the table, not sure what the heck is happening and if it's going to get progressively worse. And like, this is what I'm orienting to right now. This is what helps me be a little bit more here, because I knew there was enough of me that knew I want to stay mentally available to like make the best decisions that I can make right now. And I knew that letting myself flood with all these freak out thoughts wasn't going to help me. Right. So again, I want to highlight I had enough nervous system regulation. Like I'm sort of in that in between place where I knew that. Sometimes we're not there anymore, right? Sometimes we don't have that ability to think through of like, oh, I need to help settle my system right now so I have the best chance of getting out of this situation in an okay way, right? But in that situation, I had enough of that on board to know I really want to use whatever I have right now to be as regulated and here as possible. Right. So I was practicing those things. And then I was practicing telling myself, right now, everything is okay. Right. Everything seems okay. So I would look around and look for signs and evidence and clues that things are okay right now. And just stay here for now. We don't need to make any big decisions right now. Right. So that helped me too. Like that ability to assess, is there immediate danger right now? Should I stay here or should I do something different? And like I had enough presence to see it's best to stay right now. Right? Don't go running around your space trying to find a better spot. Just stay here. This is good enough for right now. Because that's where my head went. Oh, but they told us doorway. Should I try to find a doorway? Like, but then how would I be under the doorway exactly? Am I better under the table? And am I far enough from the windows? I'm like, no, just stay here. And then it was, this is an IKEA table. Will it hold up? Right. And then what's above me? I'm on the 30th floor. Like, wow, but like, will this table, anyways, I was like, orienting to that doesn't feel good right now. I had enough on board, enough regulation to be present to. If I orient to that, it's going to take me more into panic.
Yeah.
If I orient to this is safe enough and good enough for right now, this will help me. So there was that.
It feels, while I'm listening to you, I'm getting this visual of little Georgiana under the table with a loving, helpful parent who lets them know how to be with this moment. It feels really sweet.
Yeah, I was trying to talk myself through it in that way, right? Of what would a loving parent tell you? And I remember talking recently with a friend who is also a parent, and I can't remember the exact scenario, but we both experienced something similar where you're scared. As a parent, you're scared, but you also know, like, I can't freak my kid out even more right now. So I'm trying to find that sweet spot of acknowledging what they feel is off, but also instilling enough confidence that, hey, I'm here with you. I'm going to protect you.
Yeah.
Right? But also not minimizing what's happening, because that's also not helpful. Not minimizing to myself what's happening, right? And checking out completely. And it's a really interesting sweet spot to try to find.
I bet. Yeah.
And that's what I was noticing under that table was like, I'm trying to not make this bigger than it is right now. I'm also not trying to minimize it and pretend like everything's fine. What's that sweet spot? And like, I noticed I had to try different things, and that became even more apparent as I was getting more and more signs that the earthquake is over and we're technically okay. Right. So this is where it starts. It can sound even a bit funny. I was like, okay, I hung out on the table. I was like, I think it's over. I hung out on the table and I started searching like Facebook, and like other people had said, "Oh my gosh, earthquake." I think I texted some friends. I called someone. Meanwhile, I'm still under the table. There was a part of me that felt safer under the table for quite some time. And part of me was laughing at myself in like a very sweet way of like, I think it's over. You can probably get out from under the table. But there was something in my system that said I would feel better to just stay under the table for a little bit. So I did.
And to get some information, like what you're describing is self-sourcing safety data, like there's no mom there or teacher there or government there to say it's okay. You're alone under a table in an earthquake and you have to figure out how to settle yourself and make the next decision and know when to emerge.
Totally. And I remember, I'm like, oh, I think it's safe enough, because I was like, my phone is my only sort of lifeline right now. And luckily, we're in a situation where there's Wi Fi, there's still cell service, right? Nothing got disrupted. And so I was like, I should plug in my phone because I don't know if another earthquake's going to happen or what's going to happen. I said, I should plug in my phone. So I was like looking around, peeking out from under the table. I'm like, I think it's safe. I think it's safe to go grab my charger and plug in my phone. So I did that. But my system was, I don't feel safe yet, just sitting in my apartment like everything's fine. So I'm like, I'm just going to go under the table again. So I just had my phone plugged in and I just hung out under the table for
Yeah.
a little bit longer until, you know, I felt better and ready to come out. And so what was interesting was I noticed in my body when I felt the pull to come out. Not when I felt I should be ready to come out, but I felt like, I feel like it's okay to come out. I have a desire to come out from under the table now. And I could feel just energy coursing through my system. And it was interesting because it was over. Like all signs around were like, it's over now. But my body had such energy flowing through it.
Yeah.
Um, and at that time, though, because there's going to be another quality of that energy that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, I felt energy, but the energy was pulling me back under the table. So I'm like, okay, let's go back under the table. And so I hung out there for a bit. And then I would feel it pull me out. And like I'm literally like crawling out from under the table, and I'm like standing up. And then again I'd feel the pull, like, no, it's not time yet. Go back under. So like I probably went under and out from the table many times in a period of like, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes. But I was like, let me just let that happen. Let me just trust my system. Like I don't need to I don't need to understand exactly what the heck is going on. And this doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. And nobody's system needs to need the same thing for me to know that it's okay to need this. And like my system is just feeling that consistent pull to go back and forth. Let's just honor that right now. And so I did. And that's sort of what I told myself. Your system feels the need to go back and forth. Let it. So I did that. And then finally, it felt better and felt like what I needed to get out from under the table. But I felt so much energy in me that I could have just carried on with my day, but I just knew, I sensed my body needs to move some of this energy. So I went into feeling my feet on the floor and just shaking, jumping, moving energy around. But what I did was I combined that with, I feel my feet on the ground. I combined that with, I have signs that I'm safe. All the buildings are still standing, right? The walls are intact. And I talked myself through that while I was jumping and shaking, right? And so I was using body awareness of what I was feeling, what was feeling sturdy, especially after an earthquake, what was feeling sturdy underneath me felt really important to orient to. Moving my body in a way that my body just intuitively felt was necessary was important. And using the words to remind me that I'm okay right now, that it's finished, and looking with my eyes and using my ears to orient to like signs that I'm safe right now, and like telling myself that with words. Like it was a combination of all of those things that helped me. And then after that, I felt the pull to sit and lay on the couch. And I think I might have tried to sit on the couch earlier. And by tried, I just mean I went to sit on the couch. But then my body was like, no, it's not sitting time. Like there's all this energy needs to move. So it felt really important to me to like let that happen. And then I'm going to tell the next piece of the story, which is, I think, really funny, really telling about how I've been wired.
Mm.
So, anyways, I started to feel like earthquake is over. I'm okay. I still felt some energy in my body, right? And I was like, oh, and this is happening in like a short period of time. Like this is, but I'm just telling it like piece by piece. And maybe it seems like this is like hours long, but really this is all within, I don't know, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And then my old brain and conditioning came online. Oh, you can just call your client back and like finish your session together because everything's fine now. You're
Yep.
fine.
Ta-da.
Ta-da. And then I just started laughing at myself. I'm like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that because your old mind stories tell you you're not dying, so you're fine. Just get back to work. Right. But my body was telling me, no, I still feel like a lot of energy coursing through my system. Not to the same degree of unsettledness as a bit earlier, but it was coursing through me in a way that I'm like, if my goal is to be present with my client, this isn't going to help. Right? The energy that's here needs a place to just start settling and moving out of the system. I knew enough through lots of practice. This is not a settled body experience. This is a mind telling me everything's fine now. You're okay, so carry on. Right? But my body wasn't quite there yet. So I decided to email her and just say, hey, like that was an earthquake. And thank you for being understanding, which, she of course was. And let's find a time to reconnect another time. Right. Like I felt it was important for me to let her know that I'm okay.
Yeah.
Right. And to acknowledge that that was a really abrupt way to end things. And that might have stirred up stuff for her too. And to, remind her to make sure she gets the care and support she needs, because that's also an experience for her. Not just that our call ended so abruptly, but like someone is going through something on the other side and you have no information and you have no way of helping, right? So that I wanted to acknowledge that being on the other side of that has its own things that can be scary and not easy feeling. And then I thought, well, what about my next client later? And this is my new brain thought patterns, which was, let's just see how your body feels in the next little bit. And let's decide that later. And I was reminding myself, I don't need to know the answer to that right now. I'm like, oh, I felt my whole body settle. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't need to know the answer to that right now. Right.
That's good.
And my old system would have been like, nope, let's decide. I'm either fine and I'm going to show up, or, oh my gosh, like maybe I got to cancel it all. And by the time it got closer to that time, I felt in my system, I feel like I can be present with someone. And I feel actually it would be good for me to have that experience of having presence with someone. So I was like, no, I can do this. And I also thought it was important to let the person know as we got on our call. I'm like, hey, just so you know, here's a little bit of context of what I'm coming into our time together with. Right? I'm going to track what's happening with my system and let you know if I sense that I can't fully be here with you. And she appreciated that. And like, I really love this practice, practicing this with a couple the other day when we were working together, of like, before we even come and talk about hard things together, like, how about we check in and let each other know, like, what am I coming here with from earlier in the day? What do I have capacity for? What can I offer here? Which part of myself can I bring? And what might I need in order to be more able to be with you here?
Mm.
And so it was nice to be able to have that conversation and like set up some expectations, remind ourselves we have permission to pause and change things up and just check in with ourselves and each other. So that was really neat for me to play around with doing that differently than old patterning would have me do it.
Mm. Yeah. You said something in there that struck me as being important and ingenious when you were reorienting. I can't remember if it was before or after lying on the couch after the earthquake. You were orienting yourself specifically to sturdy things, to things that gave you that sensation. And that made me think about non-earthquake related traumas and what we can be physically orienting to and how helpful that can be to give us the feelings that we're looking for, whether it's sturdiness or love or acceptance or whatever
Yeah.
it is.
What I've noticed over time is there's always going to be something to orient to that feels a little bit better or more decent than what our old patterning of orienting to fear and scary and hard things has us do.
Yeah.
Right? I remember being on a group call once and we practiced placing our hands on the wall. And a separate practice was we practiced leaning our backs against the wall just to get used to what the feeling is of feeling sturdiness. And that those exercises people shared were so profound for them that they were like, you mean at any point in any day, I could just go lean up against the wall and feel a sense of sturdiness and feel my whole body shift and settle? I could just put my hand up against the wall, even though everything is swirling in my mind and in my body and feels so uncomfortable. And I will start feeling just a little bit different. They were shocked and they were also so pleased. And they were so excited at this sense of agency that they have to support themselves during hard moments. They're like, someone said, I have walls everywhere all the time. You mean I could do this anytime? And then someone else says, I'm outside and there's a fence,
Yeah.
right? And someone else said, I'm outside and there's a tree. And everyone felt what it was like to include the experience of feeling something sturdy while there was stuff going on inside, in the mind and in the body. And it made a difference for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? It made a positive difference for them. So, yeah.
I really like that, the seeking of something specific. I know we talk about, being 1% more comfortable, or what's the next non-pattern thing, or decent, or just not bad feeling thing. But looking for a specific feeling and creating that for yourself is a little tweak on that feels specifically helpful in the case of something like an earthquake and applicable in so many ways.
Yeah, it was really helpful for me. And that whole earthquake experience was very interesting for me to track what was happening in my body. I was like, wow, like I was really surprised at how much energy was coursing through my system afterwards, even after intellectually I knew it was over.
Yeah.
And even after looking around and seeing and hearing that it's over, my body didn't feel like it was over. My body still had stuff to process and feel and purge and move and integrate,
Yeah.
right? And that's another great reminder. Sometimes intellectually we feel finished with something or something makes logical sense, but my body isn't fully complete yet with what it needs to complete in order to feel more settled and more safe and more able to be present and more able to move into the next part of the day.
Yeah. It's such an intense combination because there's the physical earthquake happening that your body's experiencing. And then there's this earthquake in your mind of like 8 million things that you know you're supposed to be doing. And that on its own is like enough of an earthquake for me. But then to be physically having an earthquake happening, like that's a lot of things.
It's a lot of things, right? And I remember under the table, something said, "You got to call someone," right? Like call my partner, and I like realized, well, he's not even the same province. Like, what the heck is he gonna do, right? And then I went to this is really funny. I went to I should I should be figuring out if my children are safe. Like there was a moment of like, what kind of mother am I? Right? But there was an first moment, which was I feel scared and I want to feel supported, right? I want to know that like have reminders that I'm okay.
Yeah.
And then like I remember the phone ringing and I'm like, that's not actually the most helpful first phone call for me to make right now. And I like hung up.
That
And
was the kids or the partner?
that was a partner. I was
Yeah.
like I felt like I could acknowledge I want to feel reassurance right now. I want to feel like so I didn't make that wrong.
Yeah.
But I also could acknowledge I want to know if my kids are okay.
Yeah.
So I hung up and then I called my kid's dad. And then I realized my kids are not even home. They're at school. Like so all of this is happening, right? When you say the earthquake of the
Yeah.
mind, like it's all and like any other day, I
Yeah.
could have told you
Yeah.
where my kids were. But I was like, I don't even know what time it is. Maybe I do know what time it is. I don't know what day of the week. Like, what? Where the heck are my children?
There's so much like even having two conflicting thoughts in our mind is enough. But when you're meant to be under a table, in a doorway, filling your bathtub with water, phoning people, it's too much. Like, no
It was
wonder.
so
No
much
wonder
information.
we freeze. Yeah.
So, so then I talked to their dad, and I'm like, "Did you feel that?" He's like, "Yeah, I felt that." And like we talked it out a little bit, and I noticed how soothing it was for the system
Mm.
to to just be in connection with another human being. Like I remember when he said something along the lines of, "I felt scared. That was scary." I was like, "Oh yeah, it's okay. It makes sense to feel like that was scary. That was scary, right?" And then as I was talking to him, I realized like, well, my kids are not home. They're at school. And that could have sent me into a panic, right? Like I could hear and see the mental thoughts wanting to pile up of like, how am I going to get in touch with my kids? Are my kids okay? Like that route. And then so I'm like, okay, let me orient again. Let me look outside. The whole neighborhood looks fine, right? If I'm fine, their dad is fine, my friends who I've texted are fine, chances are my kids are probably fine too. And I chose to orient to that, right? I also chose to orient to like, even if my kids are not fine right now, there's nothing that I can do right now to do anything for them,
Yeah.
right? So I think I like tracked their location on the phone. I could see they were at school. I just sent them a quick message, right? And I didn't even know if did they feel it? Did they not? Are they freaked out? Are they not? I don't know, right? And another thing that was interesting was so this is all about choosing what we orient to in order to support our system. And again, I want to say, reiterate, sometimes we're so dysregulated that we don't have access to choose what to orient to anymore, right? Or it's just, I'm not trying to say this as in you can always choose to orient, but sometimes I think we'd be surprised at how much capacity we do have to choose, even if it's just momentary, right? But choosing where you orient to, even if it's just for a moment, can begin to make a big difference, right? And so I noticed the sounds of children outside. And so I looked out the window, and there's two schools I can see from the 30th floor. And I saw all these kids outside on their field, all lined up. And I'm like, oh, it looks like the school is taking care of the kids. The kids are all okay. They're following their safety protocols. All the kids are okay. So I chose to orient to that and have that give me, like, be a source of evidence of safety, right? Those kids are all okay. Chances are my kids are okay too, right? And I could tell that I felt better orienting to that than orienting to, are they dead? You
Yeah.
know, are they right? Okay. Like, yeah, our brains go there. That's fine. But staying there for a very long time, I knew wouldn't feel good for me.
Yeah.
Right.
The more attention we can give to regulating ourselves in non-active moments is such a gift. I'm remembering a time where my mom thought I was missing, and it was, I think, right around the time where um, a little boy whose name I can't remember went missing, and he was on all the milk cartons as a missing boy. And
From the
I had just,
playground
what's
at
that?
the school? From the playground at the school? I wonder
N-
if that happened.
what's that?
There was a boy missing from a playground, I think, at a school.
Maybe that could have been. Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah, I don't remember his story, but um, my mom was not oriented to any soothing thoughts. And it was a time before cell phones, and like it's really, at the time I was maybe 11 or something, and I didn't know anything about nervous systems, but in hindsight, wow, like there was no access to safety information, like looking for signs of safety wouldn't have been anything. It would have just all been the stories that we're so easily slipping into.
mhm. Yeah, like, I'm brought back to a moment where I lost one of my kids at the grocery store, right? But yeah, like, if we don't have practice, it's not in our awareness in more chill moments to practice orienting to signs of safety and sturdiness, why would it occur to us in a
Right.
moment of panic and crisis, right? It makes sense that we have no access to that, that we would never even consider that, that our patterning would be to continue to orient to things that make us feel even more panicked and more overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right? Um, this reminds me of when my little guy had some weird, we were in the middle of like nowhere. It was during COVID. I won't go into the full story, but something weird was happening with his eye. And like he was super freaked out. And I'm trying not to freak out. It's late. It's like dark. The roads are dark, windy roads that we don't know very well. Finally found this clinic that was open. And that was one of those moments where you're scared yourself as an adult. Your kid is scared. You're trying not to freak them out some more. And I was like, the only thing that I feel like I can do for this kid right now is acknowledge that he's scared and orient him to signs of safety. Right? So I was like, can you feel your seat? Right? Can you feel your butt on the seat? Right? Can you see that mommy's in the car with you and that we're going to find a doctor and there's going to be a doctor who's going to help you, right? And can you see that even though it's dark, that, we have the headlights and the headlights are helping us see, right? And he's like, yes, mommy. Yes, mommy. Okay. So each yes, mommy, I could tell was a little bit more settling, a little bit more of like orienting to something that was at least decent or more decent than him freaking out, right? And like after the whole scenario was over, when we were driving back to this rented place we had because we were on vacation, um, he said, Mommy, I thought they were going to have to take my eye out. So, like, that's the first time I really got a clue of like how scared he was.
Yeah.
Right. And to see that he was that scared, but these little things helped him through to not be like losing it. Right. It just showed me like the importance of being able to orient to what else, the fear and what else, what's scary and what else is here, right? What feels just the what else. And then on top of that, what feels a little bit better? What is a little bit more decent? What are some signs of safety? And it's a big deal to be able to practice that when we don't need it so that we have access to it when we do need it.
Huge. Yeah. As we've demonstrated with all of the earthquake drills, that shit does not penetrate when times get tough. So practicing, I mean, one of the things that we do in our groups is we walk people through scenarios, like actual life scenarios. So it's not like, do your earthquake drill while nothing is wrong and you're, 5 to 7 years old. It's let's practice during an earthquake, and see what actually comes up for us and how we respond, and continued practice during earthquakes until the day where we have whatever the exact helpful response for an earthquake is, comes second nature.
Yes. And like the thing is, like, we can't simulate an earthquake to happen for that to practice in an earthquake. But there's many metaphorical, energetic earthquakes happening on our day-to-day basis, right? Where you're a little bit thrown off, you're a little bit startled, but that don't freak you out as much as maybe an earthquake might. And like those are great opportunities to practice using these skills. And you start noticing which ones did I remember, which ones did I have the muscle memory for, which ones did I not have any access to. Oh, that's great information. Like if I totally forgot that, then it might be helpful to practice that a little bit more when there's no stressors or minimal stressors, to build it into muscle memory a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right? Because there was no muscle memory. Like once you leave elementary school, maybe middle school, the muscle memory of like feel something off, go straight under a table starts going away because you're not practicing that.
It does. And actually, there was an earthquake when I was 7, and I
Mhm.
was with my little 7-year-old friends, and we immediately got up and stood in a doorway.
Yeah, because you had probably been practicing it so much,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Muscle memory was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
You didn't go into thinking,
No.
right? Because I didn't have the muscle memory to go in under the table. I had the intellectual knowing, but I couldn't access that fast enough. Like I started to froze and I was like thinking like, do I go under the table? Do I go under the doorway? Am I far enough from the windows?
Yeah. It's also adult version, right? In elementary school, you just have a desk. You just go under the desk. With adult brain, now you're aware of the windows, you're aware of so many more and different things, and you have different responsibilities. And then poof, the brain shatters and we freeze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a reminder that we can freeze, we can unfreeze. I wanted to point out that my old patterning of pushing through before my system is finished, right? And what I really practiced that day is a bit of the opposite pattern of like, let's just give yourself a little bit more time. Let's give your body a little bit more time, right? But I want to acknowledge that some of us, and maybe even me in another scenario, we might go into the, oh, now I'm going to do nothing. That was so scary, right? And I noticed myself shut down, and I'm going to believe that I have to stay shut down to stay safe, right? And so this is not shaming or blaming when we're in shutdown or freeze, but this is starting to notice, oh, do I have patterns of staying in that protective place and that survival response place past the point of danger, right? Because that's where that's what we want to become aware of, is like to assess, is the danger still present that it requires me to still be in this shutdown or freeze or whatever to self-protect? Or are there signs of safety on board enough that I can start awakening, like coming back, emerging back into life again?
Yeah.
Right. And so we might be playing with different protective patterns that we want to start shifting into something newer. Right.
Yeah. Thanks,
Mhm.
Chi.
Mhm.
Anything else you want to say about this before we do a closing practice?
Let's see. Hmm. I think what was neat was, having gone through that whole experience, I feel more capable if something like that were to happen again. Um, and the reason I want to highlight that is, sometimes when we've gone through hard things in life, maybe we're relieved that it's over, but we forget that if it were to happen again, I'm a little bit more experienced, I'm a little bit more aware, I have a little bit more capacity, right? To, I'm bringing a different self to the next occurrence if it happens.
Yeah.
Right. And that sometimes people are afraid. They're like, well, this bad thing that happened before, like I was just such a mess, and like I really like couldn't show up for myself, or whatever the hard thing is that they're shaming or blaming themselves for. And what I like to remind them of is like, well, what are the skills and awareness that you've built since that time? What's different since that version of you? And they're like, oh, so maybe I wouldn't, right? Maybe I have a lot more resources on board now to be with something that's hard,
Yeah.
and I would experience it differently than how I experienced it last time.
Yeah.
And when they orient to that and they pay attention to what happens in their body, they're like, oh, that feels relieving. That feels settling.
Yeah. It's like the practicum placement after the book learning, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
And how it's interesting how that gets locked into the body in a different way because it was such an emotional event. It wasn't just reading about earthquakes, it was experiencing earthquakes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Gigi.
You're welcome.
All right. What are you feeling for a closing practice?
What I'm feeling for a closing practice, because I've been like squished into a corner in this different setup because it's spring break and children are home. My body needs to move. My body needs to feel some flow. So I'm going to move my body in a way that's opposite to how it's felt it needed to be for that last hour.
Yeah.
I was as comfortable, like I was tending to my system throughout that hour. But I want to give my body the opportunity to do what it couldn't do earlier,
Yeah.
a little bit more.
Sitting still is the worst.
It was really neat. The other day I was with a client, and I was walking them through a practice that where they needed to stand up. And often I'll just stand up with them, right? And we'll do the thing together. But this was the first time I was with this person, and for some reason, I hadn't stood up right away. And I didn't want to startle her by standing up, and her wondering, like, what the heck is this lady doing? So I said, would it be okay if I stood up with you and we do this next practice together? And she was all for it. And then we just hung and like we did the practice. Then we like continued on and talked and reflected, standing and swaying together. And it was so pleasant. It was so nice. I just wanted to point that out of like, we tell ourselves there's all these shoulds of how we should be. Right. And it's nice sometimes to let our bodies experience like, oh, maybe it could be different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Nice.
I'm already happier. Oh.
Good. Yeah, a little movement goes a long way.
Mm.
It moves a lot of energy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Is that it for this week?
I think so.
I think so. Okay.
I think
Well, then, thank you guys for being with us. Please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.